You're listening to the Dudes and Dads Podcast, a show dedicated to helping men be better dudes and dads by building community through meaningful conversation and storytelling. And now, here are your hosts, Joel DeMott and Andy Lehman.
Welcome back, guys. We are on episode 6 of the Dudes and Dads Podcast.
Where has time gone, Andy? Episode 6.
We're here.
We are here. We're loving it. My only gripe about today, Andy, was the sun finally came out. This has been a May to remember, or one I'd like to forget. And the sun comes out, but it doesn't come out until the very end of the day.
That is true. It's been raining most of this month, and it's been awful.
Lord knows I need that sunshine.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Andy, here we are, episode number 6. This is going to be one for the record books, and I can say that because we only have 6 episodes in, and so
it's going to be a record breaker.
It's going to be a record breaker for sure. I got it. I feel it already. So Andy, let's just kick this off with our first segment because we got so much to talk about tonight.
What's brewing?
Andy, fill us in on what you
So we're actually we're actually doing tea tonight, not coffee. So we are brewing the Lapsang tea. It's, if you've never had it,
Pinky's out.
It is great. It's kind of a smoky flavor to it. It's like drinking a campfire.
It's like drinking a campfire. That's exactly what it is. And as I was just reminiscing about this, the first time I had this in public was up at the Sanchez restaurant in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was you, myself, and 2 other of our good buddies on a men's deep spiritual retreat. We stayed at the Dominican Center, if I am remembering correctly, and then we went to the Sanchez, which is a tapas restaurant. It's T-A-P-A-S, in case you were confused about what I'm referring to. Some people hear that word wrong. And we were there around the table eating all kinds of strange foreign foods that we couldn't pronounce. And Andy goes, yes, we'll have the Lapsang tea.
Lapsang, yes. And that
and the dude looked at us like you were on the inside, like you had like some sort of Illuminati membership or something. It was amazing.
It's true because it's a good tea. If you've never had it, it's good. It's kind of like drinking a campfire.
And you ordered it online, right? You just
I have had it online, yes.
Yes. So can you get Lapsang? Like, can you just go down to your local grocery store?
Usually you have to get it online, or like I got this cup here, or this bag that I have here. We were in Philadelphia a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, and I got it at a little place there. So
Philadelphia, the epicenter of Lapsang tea. You heard it here first.
All right, so Joel, let's talk a little bit about tonight about our guest. So we do have a guest tonight.
Yes, we do have a guest. We are absolutely thrilled to welcome our good friend Dustin Kaehr to the show. Dustin, well, let's do the dad stats first of all. Dustin has been married to his wife Amber for 20 years, the big 20, and he's got 4 boys, which means he knows the pain that we experience with 4 children and running around and all of that good stuff. But 4 boys. In order of youngest to oldest, Liam 9, Owen 11, Joa 13, and Evan 16. I just the real question I have is, does this man sleep? That's what I want to know.
So Dustin, do you sleep?
Do you sleep?
No, I do not sleep.
See, and the thing is, like Andy and I, like both of our youngest right now are doing that whole like crawl back into bed us thing. Like Molly is 2.5, Hattie's 3.
Yes.
And I'm getting a heel to the kidney on a nightly basis. And I want to look to somebody who's a little bit farther down the road and say, oh, certainly.
It gets better. It's just a different kind of exhaustion.
Okay, that's fantastic.
So
I feel so encouraged already. So Dustin, amongst doing the amazing work that he is as a father of 4 and being married for 20 years, he also serves as director of Lippert Academy for Leadership. For those of us in the Elkhart County area specifically,
we know Lippert.
Lippert, absolutely. Just turn a corner and they've got a building there. So let's see here. I'm going, Dustin, if these numbers are inaccurate, I'm going off of your LinkedIn account, so we'll see if they're up to date. 11,000 co-workers there at Lippert, 65 facilities.
Correct.
17 states.
Yep.
Including Canada and Europe.
Correct.
You've gone international.
We have gone international.
Oh, my
yes,
goodness gracious.
Yep.
And if that weren't enough, you know, when I read Dustin, what he's doing, it's like I really need to get my life on order. I got to get some things together. He also serves as an associate pastor at River Oaks Community Church, where Dustin and I actually, when we all first connected back in the day.
Yeah.
And so he helps with adult discipleship ministries kind of in general and leadership development there. And he teaches on Sunday on occasion.
On occasion.
Oh,
Again, he does
On
not
occasion.
sleep.
oh my goodness gracious.
Exactly.
Man does not sleep.
So much to learn from this man. So we're just excited to have you here, Dustin.
That's
Thanks so
great.
much for
Yeah,
joining us.
absolutely.
We appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
And this is like we've had good guests. This is like I gotta say, we're on a roll. I don't mean to pat us on the back, but we're doing pretty well here. Like it's just boom, 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 boom. So Andy, give us the rundown here, because not
Sure,
only
absolutely.
does Dustin do all of these things, he's also an author, and so tell us more about that.
So the book that we're actually going to be talking about tonight is a book that Dustin wrote, Dear Boys, the letter every son needs from his father. Sorry, I butchered that one up there, but
It's okay.
So we're talking about this book a little bit tonight. So first off, can you tell us a little bit just the basics of the book, why you decided to write it, and just kind of your elevator pitch on the book first?
Yeah, so the elevator pitch for the book is it's a letter that I wanted to have written for my boys, that if something were to happen to me, if I weren't going to be here to raise them into the godly men I'm called to, that would sort of be the guide and a roadmap. And so, I mean, that comes out of some personal health history
Sure.
of my own. You know, I'm 42 years old. On my dad's side, my grandfather passed away at 61. He had a brother die at 63, another brother at 54. My uncle passed away at 58, and my dad passed away at 53. So there's this weird genetic disease, rare, that runs in our family. It's a long, boring story unless you're a science geek, so I won't bore anybody with that. But I've known since 26 that I've had that.
Okay.
And up until recently, really no cure. I'm on a drug now. We hope it's working, but we don't know. So this idea that, you know, I have this huge heart to go, how am I going to raise my sons, and what happens if? Now, the reality is, you know, we could pull out of the parking lot today
Right.
and get run over. So to live with that. And so that's where the 10 sentences came from.
Okay.
The inspiration for 10 sentences came from Abraham Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address, right? He was not the primary speaker that day. Some guy that none of us have ever heard of and remember spoke for a couple
Right.
hours. And Lincoln gets up and in 10 sentences and less than 275 words delivers the Gettysburg Address. So I heard that and I'm like, well, 10 sentences, that starts to flow for me.
Sure.
So I wrote the letter based off of that, and it really just talks about what are those areas of life that I want my boys to hear directly from me on, either in person or in this letter. And then the book's designed to go through together, fathers and sons.
Okay.
So there's questions in the back for fathers and sons to go through. So I'm going through it now with my oldest as he's getting ready to turn 16 just here
Gotcha.
Thursday. So that's coming to an end. So that's what the book is designed for.
Cool. So you've only officially gone through it with one, or going through it with one son.
Correct. Correct.
So
Yep.
the others know it's coming. They have,
The others, yeah, they know it's coming because once it showed up to the house, and you know they don't have their copy,
But they
don't
can't-
have their copy, but they know that it's out there. And honestly, a lot of what I talk about is stuff they naturally just hear me talk about
Sure.
all of the time.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So you mentioned 10 sentences. Let's. I've read the book. I was actually privy to kind of read it you
Yep.
know, before it actually even came out. I got to read parts of that.
Yep.
And one of the things you mentioned in there is having mentors and accountability partners. Let's talk about that, and what exactly, how does that play into this and in raising your sons and,
Yeah,
and
so
leaving a legacy for them?
you know, I think for me, I think there's this idea that all of us should have. We should sort of always have three people in our lives. We should always have someone above us, right? That's a mentor, someone who's gone before, to give us guidance, to encourage us to know, hey, they eventually do leave the house. Like we need those kind of
Please,
people.
Lord, please.
Yeah, please. Like they are gonna, right? So you need someone above you. You need people beside you that are those accountability people, and really people that help you remember your identity. I mean, I'm almost becoming more of a believer that it's more of an identity group than an accountability group, right? Like if we all have the same heart and the same purpose, that's an easier conversation than, hey, did you do that? Did you not do that kind of thing?
Yep.
And then you need to have someone behind you. So you should be mentoring, and it doesn't matter what stage of life any of us are in. We could always be mentoring someone. I mean, even Evan at 16 going as a freshman, he's involved with, you know, the young kids at church and doing that type of stuff. So for me, it's putting people around, and I want my boys to see that. That also means that I've got a group of men that will come alongside my boys if something were to happen to me.
Yes.
Okay.
Right? Because the reality is as great as my wife is, she couldn't raise godly men.
Right.
Because she's
She's
not a
not a
godly
woman,
man,
yeah.
right? And so we've got, you know, I've got 5 men, some that are really good friends of mine that know Evan. Others, they're really good friends of Evan's that I know. And they all got copies of this. And it was a real, if I'm not here, here's the role.
Sure.
Are you in?
And I'm recently, as Jack and I were upping our life insurance, we have to have the conversation of where our kids go if something catastrophic loss. Both of us are gone, right? And it was like the darkest and yet most confusing conversation I have had, because we're like, who do we leave? Because for our case, you get 4 kids.
Yeah. Oh, believe me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just one or two.
That's not just, and it doesn't matter how much life insurance is coming with them.
Yeah,
They
that's
still
exactly
get the
right.
4 kids.
It's like you get $2,000 and well, wait a sec. Get $2 million and 4 kids. Well, wait, hold on. When you were thinking about that tribe of those men, you had some things you were looking for.
I did. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that that they were secure and they knew who they were in their own faith. They had their own clear understanding of what manhood meant. It didn't have to be my definition, right? But it had to be. They had to know where they were going, right? The whole idea is, and the book is designed to help call my boys from something to something, not just calling them out of childhood and adolescence into nothing, but call them to something. So there had to be some men that I felt could speak into Evan. And the reality, some of those guys will be the same 5 men for Joah, and some will be different. Yeah. Right? Because Joah is different. All my boys are very different. And so they'll all have, some of those men will be the same. Right? We've got a good friend that you guys know, Scott Tilley.
Yeah.
Right? Scott is one of those men. Right? And so, but there's also men that Joah doesn't know them and won't connect with them.
Yep.
So there'll be other people. I wanted them to be people that I knew had enough maturity, and it's a big ask.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
To go.
Was there an interview process?
No, I'll be honest. It really drove off of the relationship with Evan.
Yeah. Okay.
Is where it started.
Great.
And then once it did, it was an interview process to go, here's my expectation. Read the book, because I talk a lot about the other men that will come alongside him and what that means, right? Because that means, hey, you're going to need to be letting him hang out with you and your family, right? Assuming at some point I would assume my wife would get remarried, but I want them to see what godly marriage looks like. Like there are conversations you all need to be checking in on him, because I'm really not going to be there. So it's a big ask. And it was also one of those things that you can lose that status.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because you're there now, if something happens, okay, all of a sudden I don't want you to be that influence. Or as they get older, relationships change. Okay, it just may not be. And I think that's important for us as we think about identity groups, as we think about that. They're seasonal.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, depending on the season of life, that depends the kind of mentor you have. Depending on the season of life, it depends the kind of identity or accountability group you have.
So you went into the group, like, checking out the guys, saying, hey, like, would you do this? But hey, also know that this may change. You may not always be on this.
Yeah, just go. It's you're in until you're not, and then you're out.
Right, and nothing. No offense
and
to
no
you.
No offense to that.
And it's not like you find like a severed head horse in your bed or anything like that.
No, and some of that Evan will outgrow that. I mean, let's be honest. By the time, at this point, I mean, we've got his manhood ceremony coming up Saturday. By the time he's now going to be 16, he still needs some of those men in his life, but now he's going to start playing an active role in his brothers. Right. So at some point he'll never outgrow the need for those people above, around, and below. Right. But the guides may not have the same role they would as if something were to happen to me now.
So those guides, are they also like some people you meet with regularly, like on a kind of a group, or is it just outside?
We've had conversations. I've had conversations with all of them individually and once or twice collectively. Okay. Especially as we get around some of these milestones. So as we're getting ready for what's coming up, to make sure, hey, this is what I need from you. This is the expectation and what that looks like.
Sure. Now, one of the things I did like in the book is you've got questions in there for the dad, you've got questions for the son, and you've got questions for both, and to discuss that. And I do like the fact how this is a book that you go through with your son. Yeah, and that's really, I think that's important for a couple reasons, because it sets the expectation for Evan of what does this look like. Like there's a time where it's okay for you to have some serious conversation, and 2, I wanted the dads to have to be a little vulnerable. Right, so when we sit down and we talk about what it means to honor and respect your mom, the question is, hey, where have you seen your dad honor and respect your mom in the last month? Hey, where have you seen your dad not That's tough. That's tough.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a hard question.
Yep.
So, but then all of this that we do, these conversations, they come into the teaching. They come into the parenting, right? So all I have to do now is tell Evan when he says something in a way to Amber, I go, "Hey, honor and respect," and he's like, okay. And then he'll do it to me.
Yep.
Hey, Dad, honor and respect. Crap. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Right. But that
Yep.
what I'm teaching him is what accountability, what it looks like to have other people and other men speak truth into your life.
And I'm sure that does a lot of things for them to see you say, "Hey, you can call me out on things that you don't, that I'm calling you to. You can call me out on those same things."
You bet you. In fact, when they turn 13, I take them out to breakfast, and I sort of introduce them to my definition of manhood, which is sentence 3 in the book. And I say, listen, all you need to know is that that's what it is, and I just want you to watch me for the next 3 years, because you're going to hear me use the words in our conversations, in our teachings, and then eventually it's something I'm going to ask you to embrace fully.
So you said it is 10 sentences, and the book is broken down into those sentences. It kind of has an introduction, and then it goes through each one of those 10 sentences. So I'd like to kind of break those down a little bit and just talk about those. So your sentence 1 is titled "Your Guide." So can you talk about that? Yeah,
that's me, right? That's the fact that they're always watching. I use the illustration in the book that I remember we were sitting around the table, and it's not uncommon, and you guys can relate to this. Someone always spills something. Right?
Absolutely.
Everything is sticky all the time.
Everything all the time, right? Well, one of the kids spilled a glass of milk, and he slammed us, and he cussed.
Yeah.
And instantly, my wife looks at me, and I go, "Why are you looking at me?" And I think it was in that moment, it was reinforced. They're watching you, like all the time, right? Like you are their primary guide.
Sure.
And that means, what does that mean to be a guide? Is that idea that you've got to get their attention. I mean, think about if you've ever had a guide take you somewhere. Right, you're listening to them because they come with a level of expertise and a level of confidence, but it also means they have to know what they're doing.
Right.
And so it really came out of, there's this reoccurring theme in Proverbs where as they write it, they continue to call my son, listen. Like you're trying to get their attention, and I think in today's world it can be really hard to get our kids' attention, especially as they get older. Whether it's with extracurricular stuff or just friends or social media. We need to make sure we get their attention, which means we better know what we're calling them to. Like I don't want to pay for a guy that has no idea where he's going. I just don't want to go for a nice walk. Yeah. And I think that's the point of what the guide is I have to know where I'm going first before I'm going to call him anywhere.
The guide does not have the role just simply because a label has been a job title has been put on them, and they're just hey, since I'm dad, I'm guide automatically. There has to be clarity.
You earn it.
Yep.
You earn it every day, and you can lose it.
Right.
You can lose it. It can be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and you can lose credibility. You're right, because think how many people that would go, "I don't ever want to be like my dad."
Right.
For sure.
And here's why: because of he did this or when he left her. So, right, there's a responsibility that comes with that. That you have to know where you're taking them to.
Absolutely. It helps you sit down, too, and kind of look at your own life and evaluate what you want to leave, that legacy that you want to leave for your sons. Like, is XYZ something that I want to pass on or not?
Yeah, and honestly, that's as much of my hope in the book is that every dad will write a letter to their son. I think where it has to start is every dad gets clarity about where they're going. Because I think that's what I see more than anything is men just don't have that clarity. They don't have a clear definition of manhood. So how are you going to call your son to it, or even teach it to your daughter if you haven't clearly defined it for yourself?
Right, and that's super important because I think that's one of those things that both sons and daughters can learn from too. Because like you said, sons are gonna be men someday, and they want to know, am I a man? And you laid that definition out for them, and then daughters also see that definition of a man and say, hey, like this is somebody that I would want to marry.
This is the standard, right?
Exactly.
This needs to be the standard for sure.
So let's talk about sentence 2 a little bit. It's called "Your Mom."
Yeah, your mom. Right, and
which
that
sounds like it could be a bad joke. Right?
Your mom.
Could be it's not your mama. We didn't title it that. So that's the way I want them to interact with Amber, right? And so that looks like honor and respect. I talk about honor and respect a lot in that chapter. And the reality is their relationship with their mom will change over time, right? It really will. When the boys were young, Amber was the primary caregiver. She was primarily responsible because we wanted them to live. So they were right.
Amen.
I mean, like
Yep.
we want them
Yep.
to live and survive. So we do what they say. But there comes that shift, especially with boys, where they're going to start. They need to start looking to us, right? And oh, by the way, moms need to start pushing them to us, and we need to be ready to bring them on. But that relationship with mom is honor and respect. And that gets different even as they get older. I talk in here a lot about when I'm gone, the way you honor your mom and the way you respect and love your mom sometimes can look really different, right? And this idea that children are called to obey their parents, but the commandment was to honor your mother and your father, right? And grown men are not to obey their parents. They're to honor their mother and father. And what does honor look like? Well, that depends, right? I mean, honor can mean a varied of things. What I give the boys permission to do is if I'm not there and they see Amber doing something where going, man, if Dad was still around, he'd probably say something because he's protector, because he was responsible. I feel like I need to have a hard conversation with Mom. I want to give them permission to do that because they need to, right? Because if I'm not here, they are now all of that for Amber that I was going to be. And so help them understanding what honor and respect looks like. I also will tell them, listen, before she was your mom, she was my wife. And I've said that pretty forcefully to a couple of my older boys going, listen to me. You can talk how you think you want to talk, but remember she's my wife. And I don't like anyone necessarily talking to my wife that way. I don't care if you're a 9-year-old, you're a 19-year-old, or you're a 39-year-old.
Right.
You're not going to talk to my wife that way because she was that before she was your mom. So that idea of honor and respect is really important to me.
I hear that a lot through the conversation that we've been having, honor and respect, and I think that's great.
Yeah. And helping understand what is that? I mean, what does honor look like,
yeah.
right? And the analogy I use is in fact, Evan and I we had this conversation, and I said, so think about the most famous female in the world that you can think of. Like, who's the one person in the world you would want to meet? Who is that? Whoever that is, whether that would be Princess Diana or Mother Teresa or whoever, right? Imagine you were at a dinner party with them, and you got to sit right beside them. Would you cut them off every time they were talking? Would you talk over their stories? Would you ask them to get up and no, you wouldn't. How would you treat? You'd listen. That's honor, right? Honor is because it's this awe factor because of who you are, right? And that's really, really important because that'll carry over into dating and eventually their own wives.
Right, absolutely. So we've touched on sentence 3 a little bit already. It's your manhood, and so that deals with your definition of what that looks like to be a man. Is it something you can?
Yeah.
You're right here.
So my definition is, and this is my definition of manhood. This is really my personal mission statement as well. Is that I want to be a man of God who has kingdom impact on my family, friends, and community by thinking differently, leading courageously, and living passionately. And so that chapter talks all about what that kingdom impact looks like. That's what I'm chasing, right? With family, friends, and community in that order. Family first, small circle, a little bit bigger circle, larger circle, and community. And then my sort of core values and my guardrails are that thinking differently, leading courageously, and living passionately. So we spend a lot of time talking about what those mean.
So, and I think for some listeners here, when you hear the term manhood or masculinity or like all these terms that get thrown around together or whatever, I don't think that would be the assumed definition for some people that hear it, because you are not placing your definition within some sort of caricature of a man or whatever. You've placed it at a higher level, and that's where we got a lot of men that are in trouble. Just and young men in particular. Last week. So Aaron gets up early before I know that he's up, and he's watching the morning news. So my 9-year-old, and I walk out there, and it's the most recent Colorado shooting, and he's watching this, and because that STEM school was a K through 12 school, so he's seeing little boys his age run out of there, right? And I'm having a moment of what is here my son is exposed to this or whatever, but I just in my mind I'm like, what? Because again, surprise, surprise, another teenage white male, two of them, open fire, And like our boys are in trouble, how they're understanding what it means to be like that, what it means to be a man, to take action. Something is off kilter there, and I think this definition that you've given us just flies in the face of all of that, like stronger, tougher, pound down, climb my way to the top, that kind of mentality.
Yeah, it's not a macho, right? But it's not, there's this idea of toxic masculinity and what does that look like? And the reality is, I think that comes from a society that has its roots and its identity grounded in something that it shouldn't be, right? Like when your identity is rooted in something higher, then you're going to be called to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And that definition is broad enough, but it fits for me, and it becomes my filter. And we're going to talk about leadership in a little bit, but it starts with knowing it all starts out of that identity. Because again, if I can't call them to something, then what happens, right? I mean, adolescence is a culturally new term, right? I mean, I freak out thinking 150 years ago my 16-year-old would be looking for farmland
That's right.
and a wife.
That's
No
right.
kidding.
Like there's no way.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But this idea that, well, you can stay on my insurance till you're 26 now, like this idea of adolescence is new, and it's because they're no longer boys, but you have a generation of guys who hasn't called them to anything related to being a man. So they're set adrift, right? It's why guys ages 18 to 34 spend more hours a week playing video games than 12 to 17-year-olds. Because it's the reason they're the number one marketed group in the world, because they have disposable income and they have no sense on how to actually spend it.
Andy, my wife, told me, and she tells our people this, that she married me specifically because I don't play video games. That was the thing that sealed the deal for her. And so, just real quick, several years ago, we were newly married, no kids yet, and two good friends of mine, we were at Cabela's, and we walked in. It was my birthday weekend, and World's Most Dangerous Hunts was like right in the front door. And they're like, Joel, we know you have a Wii. We will buy this for you if we can play it at your house. And so I'm like, sure. Jackie wasn't there. We start playing. It's like on I was babysitting my brother's 60-inch screen or whatever. And so I just want you to imagine 3 men, video game. Jackie walks in like an hour into our playing, and she just stands in the door. And that was the last time I ever played a video game.
Nothing wrong with video games, but
point being, men that are inoculating themselves to real life, to their escaping maturity.
It's escapism, right? It's not wanting to deal with the responsibilities you have, whether it's video games, working out, golf league, or fantasy football.
Right. Sure. Yep.
So sentence 4 is, we've touched on it a little bit, your guide. So is there anything else you want to talk about? That you're going to skip past
again,
that?
I think that's the men that you have to decide who are they going to be, and what are you going to ask them to do, and understand that it's seasonal and it can be temporary.
All right, so moving on then, sentence 5 is your job. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean?
So this really gets to what role do they play in each other's lives, right? So now as Evan is turning 16, he's going to be taking an active role, more of an active role, right? So how I took him out to breakfast on all these, when I take Joa through it in 2 more in a year, because we start going through it when they turn 15, Evan will take him out to breakfast once and be responsible to have a conversation with Joa about what Evan's role is as that job, right? And the reality is, if I weren't here and Liam was still of those age where he had some of those ceremonies coming up, then my boys would have to step in. If they have nephews, if they have whoever else around them, they have an active role that once they embrace it, they no longer are getting brought, they're now part of the group.
Sure.
Like you now have an active role in this job.
You're part of this calling others. And so even if, let's say, you only had one son, they still would have a job, like you said, with nephews and other people around.
Would still have a
right?
job with other people that they have influence over towards what we've called them to. Correct.
Okay, so 6 and 7 are kind of together. Your wife.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this was the hardest it really was. It was the hardest 2 chapters. And this is where, side note, if people go, what's the best thing you can tell me about writing a book? And I would say, get a really good editor. Because she made this look really good, because it was so bad, because it was just so hard to talk about, right? And that really is, what does loving and leading your wife look like, and how do you do that? So that talks about everything from dating, and we sort of to do a sidebar on some general rules on how to have the talk, with your sons, all the way up to what does it really mean to be the head of the house, right? I mean, what is that, I mean, if we're called the leader, man, that's not anything to take lightly. And I think I struggled with it the most just because it's what you struggle with. I mean, you know
right,
it.
right.
Yep.
That role of head of the house and leading your wife and leading your family is really, really hard. But it's in those two sentences where I lay out for them, here's what that means, right? Here's what servant leadership looks like, right? Like everyone likes to talk about, Ephesians 5:22, go back to 5:21, where it says submit to one another.
Absolutely.
Like lean in,
Yep.
lean in. What does that look like for your wife? And what are those characteristics you're looking for in a wife? Because that will set the stage for a lot of other things, for sure.
And also, again, calls you back to like, okay, watch me. It keeps you in accountability with treating your wife with respect and being that leader and showing by example to your sons how that looks.
And I can tell you, this just came up last night. We were some parenting stuff, and then my wife and I'm trying to sort of decompress. And I asked her, I said, so I go, help me. I go, how would I do that differently? And then she's like, well, I don't know. What does your book say? And I'm like, okay.
Oh.
I'm like, all right, never mind. You're not
Yep.
any help. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
I just feel like that book is going to keep on talking back into your relationship.
It absolutely, absolutely will. But again, it's having that conversation with your sons that I don't think a lot of dads ever have, which is why it's really hard when they have to answer that question, look their son in the eye and talk about a time when they probably didn't do it very well with their wife, for sure.
So then 8 and 9 are another two chapters that are kind of combined under one topic, and that's going to be your Savior. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is really reminding them and talking about that I want them, right, I hope they take hold of the faith we give them, and I hope they can carry that, but there has to come a point where they have to fully integrate that and embrace it, right? I mean, we carry that faith for them. There's a reason, people will go, well, why do you go to church? And I would tell them early, I went to church to help create the habit in my boys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked the singing, and yeah, the teaching was great, but I really went to create a habit of going, and there comes a point where I hope they will embrace that for themselves. Mm-hmm. And that also gives them permission in there to go, how you live out your faith can look very different than how I live out. What God's called me to doesn't mean that's what he's called you to. And I need to be okay that if that path
Right.
doesn't look like my path,
Yep.
right? And that's true whether, listen, we play football around here, so you're going to play, like, whether it's that or whether it's your route to go to college or not go to college, or when do you get married? Do you get, like, all of those things that they've got to embrace it. I want them to take it and make it, I want them to make it their own. And I use, I sort of pick on Cleveland a little bit, but I use the analogy of,
I love it already.
yeah, I use the analogy of being a Cleveland Browns fan. I'm not, but think about, you have generations of people our age who are they are diehard Browns fans. Where did they get that from? Because it wasn't like they were on a bandwagon of a great
They
organization.
like sadness. I don't know.
That's right. They just like cloudy days in February. That's it.
Have you felt the winter breeze off Lake Erie? Oh,
Right, exactly right. But it's that idea. Why? Because their dads and their grandfathers talked about it and embraced it over
Absolutely.
and over. And now all of a sudden the kid who can't even remember a winning season remembers the play 50 years ago, they weren't even alive, that broke the city's heart. That's what it looks like for me to embrace faith. Mm-hmm. Not wanting to make my boys Cleveland Browns fans, but embracing the faith in a way that it's theirs and they own it.
Right. And the last sentence in the Joel,
no, you go for it.
last sentence the chapter sentence is called your reminder. So talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
so the reminder is just that it's the sentence says, I love you, I'm proud of you, and I always have been. Right? It's that idea that regardless of anything else, my love for you isn't based off the actions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? These other things we've talked about are really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm going to end a letter that would be read to them at my funeral, that's what I want them to remember when it's all said and done.
Yeah, closing sentence.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, one of the things that I do already for my kids is, even like almost every night when I tuck them in, I say, you're loved, and there's nothing you can do about it, because it's that idea of like, no matter who you are, no matter what you turn out to be, I'm still gonna love you, because you're my child.
Right, modeling what a father's love really looks like.
My mantra is, and they're getting tired of us. I keep on saying that. I like you and I love you.
Yeah,
I like you.
Well, there's been times where I've loved them, but
the like part is hard.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, I want, but I guess from my experience, like I want my kids to know that like I enjoy them. Like I genuinely enjoy them. Sometimes I want to lock them in a small room, but nevertheless, like, at the end of the day, it's like I mean, there are those moments. There is nothing better than seeing your kids grow up and doing it in a way that is Aaron. Okay, so Aaron, my 9-year-old, for Mother's Day, uncoached, anything, brought my wife breakfast in bed.
Ooh, wow.
I about lost it, and I'm like, but it's like, okay, where did he get that from?
Yep.
Like, where did that, there's something in him that is building, and that like I just enjoy, like those things, when those things click, when you're like, oh, something
enjoy them, right? Savor them,
because like something is happening here. Man, those are things to be celebrated for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And so then the rest of the book is just talking about you as the reader.
Yeah, so it's really that encouragement then for a dad to go, okay, it doesn't have to be 10 sentences. It doesn't have to fit that mold. Just do something, right? So I then just say, okay, here's my areas, right, is your job and your faith and your man. Like, just start somewhere. And I go, by the way, even if you need to take the majority of that letter, just start. I mean, when I came up with my definition of manhood, I didn't have mine. Originally, it was from something I had went through several years ago, and I embraced that one, and then it evolved, and I took it and made it my own, right? The same thing like we were just talking about with faith. So the whole point is just start somewhere and do something, because I think it's too important I think it's really important for sons, especially sons, to hear their father's heart as they're getting ready to go out into the world, which is where I'm at with Evan at 16. In 2 years he's completely out, and so that's going to be really important.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on and talking about this. I think we're going to talk to you a little bit more about leadership and that relates to parenting also. But first, where can our listeners get a copy of your book if they're interested in it?
So dearboysbook.com is where they can get that. The Kindle version is on Amazon. I'm working on getting the audio version out on Audible. Hopefully that will be coming. We'll get.
Are you gonna record it yourself?
Yeah. We're gonna read. I'm gonna read it myself.
Voiceover actor.
Yeah, no, for sure. So we're gonna record it myself. So hopefully Audible sometime later on this year. But dearboysbook.com is where they can go and get a copy of the book.
Awesome.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Well, now we get to also talk about one of kind of a passion that clearly intersects and draws Dustin and I together, and that is the world of coaching and leadership development. So Dustin, how long have you been with Lippert now in your director of the Lippert Academy? What is the Lippert Academy for Leadership? I'm intrigued.
So I've been with Lippert about 2.5 years. So I was there's a group of folks that are leadership directors inside separate divisions. So you've got different groups. So I did that for about 2 years. So that was doing training with frontline leaders all the way up to the executive in that division, and then doing group training and individual coaching, counseling, personal professional development. We launched the academy just this year at the beginning of 2019, as we started to have a lot of organizations sort of saw some of the things we were doing. Lippert culturally was not always the best place in the world to be. I mean, 5 or 6 years ago with 5,000 team members, they had a turnover of about 127%,
Wow.
which is awful when you think about how many people you're just churning and burning. And so what happened was that really sort of got a lot of our executives to go, hold on, there's got to be a better way. And so through really a long process, and what we've been on this journey now 6 years or so, with just in 2018 about 11,000 team members, attrition was right at 30%. So that started to get a lot of other people to go, hey, what are you doing? Like, how does that work? And so where we found an opportunity was essentially to go, well, how could we take what we've learned, not that we got it all right, not that we still don't have things to work on, but how can we take some of that and help other companies? So that's what the academy is. It's essentially a consulting agency, a separate division. And I get to work with for-profits and nonprofits inside the same industry we're in or outside that industry, doing leadership coaching and consulting. And that's a pretty broad, whatever they need, from strategic planning and business development all the way up to developing core values, to doing trainings and communication trainings and executive coaching and whatever that is. So that's what I've been doing.
My world is primarily coaching with non-for-profits and ministry groups and a lot of like youth workers and things like this. I'm assuming it's the same for you. You began to see common themes in the needs of organizations, common toxicities, common dysfunctions, all of these sort of things. What are you seeing? Like, what are you seeing right now? Like, when you're kind of like walking into a place fresh, what are like the top 3 things that you're noticing, like on the areas of dysfunction? Like, what clicks with you right away?
Yeah. So right away, the top things that come to mind is I think there's a lack of clarity, and actually vision. Right. And I ask organizations all the time, I'll go, how many of you work for an organization that has a vision statement? And everyone raises their hand. I go, how many of you could quote it without pulling out your business card? And everyone's hands go down. I go, well, that's a pretty crappy mission statement. Like if you don't know what you're called to. So I think that's the first thing. Yep. The second thing I see is especially at mid-level leaders and up, they are so task focused that they miss the real impact of interacting with people well. And then the third thing is just generally is helping people understand who they are and why they show up the way they do.
Man, oh man. So as it turns out, what he just says here apparently is not much different in the church and ministry settings. No. I wish, and it's because it's humans, right?
It's human. No, it is.
Right.
It's why even inside my role at River Oaks, we do a couple of different levels of leadership development, because it is absolutely no different. It doesn't matter if you're a for-profit or nonprofit. That dysfunction is not. It doesn't pick sides. It'll go anywhere.
Yeah, and I'm just beginning also, like when you just mentioned like the task-driven, task-oriented nature of like people seeing leadership only through the lens of getting things done and the tangibles of that, or needing, and it's like, because I think some of the best leaders, if you looked at their day, like you'd be like, what exactly did you do today? I mean, they worked hard, but if you had to put it down on paper, And the reality is if you have a high-level leader inside, especially an organization where a lot of stuff has to get done, if that leader is doing a lot of the stuff, holy cow, is that a problem? Either they're causing all sorts of havoc because they're in the weeds, or they are so driven by their own importance and ego. I've got to do this. My team can't function without me. I have to have all the answers. That's someone who is so insecure that you don't want those guys. You're paying them to lead for that reason. They should be working on the business and working on developing the teams and let the day-to-day stuff focus on that. But it's a mindset where, how much did you get done today? What'd you do? Like, show me your to-do list. How much stuff did you get done? And the problem with I think leading well, it requires you a lot of times to sit behind a desk and just go, The problem is if you sit at your desk like this right here for too long, people start to go,
what is he doing?
Are you doing anything? What are you doing? Right?
Yep.
But that's exactly what it needs to be.
Yeah, I'm just thinking recently. So my brother, Ben, if you're listening, hi. My brother was just recently hired for a large company out in Colorado. He is now a data scientist. Now, what that means exactly, don't get me started. But the CEO of the company came to him and goes, I want you to spend 50% of your time thinking and 50% of your time executing. And my brother was like, I have never heard such a high importance for thinking, for envisioning and imagining and creative space. Wow. And it's like a breath of fresh air for him. And I just think like the art of thinking, the art of actually in mental health and psychology generally we call executive attention. That is thinking about thinking, which we share. Animals don't do that. It's something we as humans get to do that no one else does. I'm just like, if you let life just go by you, executive attention leaves you very, very quickly.
Sure it does.
And people don't think that I've never seen a job description. People like, we want you to spend this much time thinking about.
And what we argue and try to help leaders understand is regardless of that person's role or responsibility, if you can engage them in thinking about their job, they will have so much more buy-in to what they're doing. They know the job better than you do anyway. So in manufacturing, we want to talk about continuous improvement a lot. Well, how do we do that? Well, you do that by going and asking the people that do it all the time how they could do it better, right? Engaging. We want to engage their heads, not just their hands. Mm-hmm. We want to engage their hearts, right? And so what we found is there's this shift that work for so long has been transactional. You show up, I pay you money, you go home. Transactional. What it has to be, and I think what you talk about the I'm a Gen Xer, but the generations behind me, right? You guys just came off of talking
right.
Gen Z, right? And those generations, they don't want transaction. They want them to be more relational. So show up, do good work, we will pay you, but how then are we going to enrich your life beyond just what you bring to us with the physical labor that you have, right? So how do we help you? How do we engage your family, right? So whether it's community service or helping them with financial planning or all of these other things, and that's the mind shift for leaders, is not to go, well, no, here's the task, get the schedule done. No. How are you engaging your people so you're actually they want to come back? Because we want them to feel good, right? I tell leaders that you live at the dinner table. So when someone goes home, they're going to go home to someone they love. And that someone is going to go, hey, how was work today? And in the moment they ask that question before they answer, that's where a leader lives. Mm-hmm. Because the person can go, ugh, it was terrible. The machines broke. The system was down. It was a really, really bad day. That's very different than going, ugh, it was terrible. The machines broke. The system was down. And he was all over me like it was my fault.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right? We live at the dinner table. So what are we doing to invest in people to help them live their best life?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And oh, by the way, that goes back to then helping them understand why they show up.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Right.
When you're going through a vision, I think it is a special kind of terrible death to go through a visioning process that comes off the rails. And I've been a part of a few of them, where we're multiple day meetings. Mm-hmm. We get caught up in the language and the lexicon of what, mission, vision, value, what, without releasing all this highly sensitive proprietary information you have, what's your because I think when we start talking about vision statements, when we talk this is vision for our family, this is vision for our workplace, this is vision for I have my own personal, I have vocational values and vision statements. What's the secret sauce for you? I mean, what's the process that you're seeing where there's buy-in, there's clarity, and then there's actionality to it?
Yeah, and in the reality, it's the same for whether we're talking an individual or an organization.
Yep.
And I'm a firm believer that leadership is inside out. That it starts with our identity. Who are you? Mm-hmm. Whether you're a person or you're an organization, right? Out of your identity come your values and beliefs. Right, those core values you guys have, that your organizations have, come out of who you are. Out of those values and beliefs, then come behaviors, right? So if you don't like the behaviors, you can't just change the behaviors. You know as well as I do, stop doing these 5 things and start doing these. That will last for a very brief period because there's no real internal change, right?
Absolutely.
So it starts with helping who are you? Who are you at your core, right? That's where I go back to that personal mission statement. Mm-hmm. I need to know who I am. I define my values and my beliefs, and now I find an organization where they line up. For companies, it's the same thing. We start with going, okay, who are you, right? Based off the group, based off maybe the C-suite, based off whatever it is, who are you? Now, what are those values? And so we help them create core values. Now, my own core values may not be the same as the organization's, but if I can buy into the organizations because they somewhat align, that's what we want. Those core values then become this common rally point. They become the North Star that regardless of socioeconomic, regardless of the way you dress or how I think you vote or what you do with your free time, if we can rally around a set of core values, we can all absolutely move in the same direction.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think too many people spend way too much money and time trying to come up with this great vision statement that will look fantastic on the wall in the lobby or on the annual report, but if no one knows it and no one actually lives it out, then just save your money.
Right.
Well, and I think that goes back even to as families. Like if you can, the way you live and your beliefs, like you said, for your child may not exactly be the same. But as a family, if you can buy into that and you can lead out of that, and you can,
I want my boys to embrace being men of God who have kingdom impact on their family,
Right.
friends, and community by thinking differently, leading courageously, living passionately.
Right.
Own that. As you get older, if you want to make that your own and tweak it, do that.
Yep.
Start with this, and I want you to buy into this, because if you don't buy into this,
Right.
it's
But
going to be miserable.
What that looks like for your sons is going to look drastically different for each of them, and as well as you. I mean, it's
For
going to
sure.
be a different.
For sure.
thing.
And I think that's the point when you're talking leadership in organizations is it can't be so narrow, right? Like if your mission statement is anything related directly to customer service or the specific product you sell, you've missed the boat completely, because it's so much bigger than that. So at an organization where we're in the RV, we talk about making lives better by developing meaningful relationships with customers, coworkers, and our community. That doesn't talk about the axles we sell or the door. That has nothing. It talks about the way we show up, not what we do once we get there.
Yep.
But it talks about the way we show up, and that's why identity is such a huge piece. And when I do coaching, we always start with that. We start with some sort of core value discovery, personality discovery, because we got to figure out how you show up before we can figure out anything else.
And so to bring it back around, I mean, as you're, I'm finding, and I've said this to a few people, I think if we're talking about discipleship process, coaching, I am now addicted to coaching as an essential part of the discipleship process. I just it has been the thing where I'm seeing growth within my teams just because of a mindset of we have to go places with people that we don't naturally want to go, that we probably want to avoid. There's going to be some tough conversations, but on the other side of this, we have a vision and a direction for where we're going. When you think about your process of coaching, what you're learning, what you've encountered, all of that, and then you bring that to your own dinner table, you bring that into your home. What is the transfer? What are some things where you see there's a direct connection there?
So the reality is, for me, coaching when I mean, I'm always hesitant of people that do coaching when they go, here's my 5-step plan for coaching. Because the only person that's really, really good for is the person that wants to sell that over and over and over again, right? Coaching is a very one-off process. And my goal in executive coaching or any kind of coaching I do is to help that person be the best version of themselves.
Yep.
Now apply that to my sons. My job is to help them become the best versions of themselves that God has called them to. And man, he may not have called them to what he's called me to. And so if I start to impress what I think, well, hey, why don't you do this? Hey, you should do, that doesn't work in coaching, right? Coaching is much more, man, that sounds hard. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly right.
That sounds like an awful problem.
I've ticked a lot of people off by asking those questions. No, you're supposed to tell me. No, that's not my job.
People go, will you tell me what to do? And I'll be like, no.
Yeah.
I won't, because I'm not you.
Right.
And I'm not in that situation. And that's it's easier for me to coach outside.
For sure.
Because outside, I can that's easy. Inside, I much more lean towards just compliance. Because everything will go, because outside I know I don't have that kind of authority. At home, perceived or real, I have a different level of authority.
Right.
And so it's just sometimes easier if you do it the way I want you to.
Yeah, or become daddy advice giver.
Yes.
People want advice. They're addicted to advice, but they don't do your advice.
And that role changes again as my boys get older, right? The conversations I have with my 15 now soon to 16-year-old is different than with Liam, my 9-year-old. Right? That my role for Liam right now looks very different than Evan. Evan, it's way more coaching. Hey, have you thought about? Hey, what do you think would happen if? Hey, tell me the worst case scenario, right? Now I don't. Yeah. Some of that I have to start with Liam, but there's times where Liam doesn't need that type. He needs a little more authority, a little more direction. He's 9.
Right.
Yep.
He needs
abstract thought is a little
right?
tougher.
We don't need it to be Lord of the Flies.
Right.
I don't want it to turn into that. With Evan, though, I mean, he's 2 years away from doing whatever he wants. I've got to make sure he's in a position
to make
to
those
go. I'm not
choices.
making that decision for you.
Yep.
And you will live with those consequences, whatever they are. So that to me is where it's one and the same.
And that's just such an antidote to the helicopter parent phenomenon that I see at every ball game or elementary school PTA meeting or whatever it is, where you're because you're selfish and because you're a self-centered parent, you're afraid, you are living vicariously through your child, and their failures are your failures. You're unwilling to do the hard work of moving in a direction of saying, you know what, there's gonna be a day where you need to own your own.
You've got to own that. I mean, and again, I always tell people, if you really think that there aren't parents that are helicopter parents where they hover, or lawnmower parents where they just clear a path, they just mow down the hard grass, right? Just go to like a second grade science fair.
Oh my gosh!
Like, come on, that kid can barely tie his shoes, and he made that? No, he didn't. The parent made that because they're concerned about what other parents are going to think.
That's exactly right.
Well, hey, Dustin, we thank you for being on, but before we let you go, we do one thing with all of our guests, and that is the Dudes and Dads pop quiz.
This I can't wait for.
So,
Dudes and Dads pop quiz.
Joel, take it away.
Okay, so here we go. Dustin Kaehr, favorite restaurant?
Locally, it's Antonio's.
Good answer. Favorite love song?
Lady in Red.
Oh, let's see. Next up, we are to. Where did you take your wife on your first date?
We went and saw the movie Dave.
Oh.
That'll date me really quickly. Some of you guys will have to Google that movie.
Let's just be clear. That was like a softball toss for Dustin to impress his wife.
Yeah.
He does remember. That's good.
Yes, I do.
Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, I had more. If you weren't doing what you're doing right now, what would you be doing? Other job that you thought maybe you had a future in? I don't know.
Elementary school teacher.
Yes.
I was
Mr.
almost. I was a semester away and a semester of student teaching away from an LEd degree.
Wow.
And then I switched because I thought I was going into it just so I could coach, and that's a bad decision.
Hey, you hear that, coaches?
So I have a psychology degree because it's the only degray I could still get and graduate in 4 years.
That makes sense. Thank you, Grace College.
Yes. Yes.
My wife will love that. And finally, we're gonna say what? Let's see here. If you could drive any vehicle that you have not driven, what would it be?
That I've not ever driven. I'd love to drive a Lamborghini.
Ooh,
just for a little bit.
We knew him when.
Yeah.
We just saw him, and it was like a blaze of glory out there. Well, Dustin Kaehr, you've successfully completed our Dudes and Dads pop quiz. Congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
I think, my goodness, Dustin, we appreciate so much this conversation.
It was fun. Thank you.
I need to go home and be a better father and a better. I've got just a lot of work to do, Andy.
You've got a book you can go through now.
Yeah, I've got the book, and it's signed too.
Listen, it is, but listen, it does not say. It's not one of these 100% guarantee things.
Oh my gosh.
There's no money back guarantee on the book.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we and listeners, here's the deal. We just want people to develop community. We want to introduce our friends to you. If you want to get in touch with Dustin, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah,
out there?
So the easiest place is Instagram or LinkedIn. It's at Dustin Kaehr. My last name is spelled Kaehr. So you can hit me up on either one of those places.
Fantastic. And of course, Dustin is the host of a podcast, a fellow podcaster. He came podcast ready.
I know. I like this side of it. It's much easier just to sit here and talk
for sure
than to do all the stuff you guys are doing. But yeah, the Lippert Academy for Leadership podcast. You can find that anywhere you get your podcast.
We'll link it on our show notes.
Yep, so we'll have that all in our show notes so you can get a hold of Dustin, see what he's doing. Dustin, I got to say, I'm excited about what you're doing. I'm excited about the impact you're making in our community, the impact you're making for the kingdom. And, man, dads, get a hold of this book, read it, do the stuff, and I just, if nothing else, you'll be one step further in the direction of just building, having healthier boys. And that's what we're trying to do here. We just have healthier boys. We've got a lot of work to do in this area, and whether it's your biological kids or other youth out there, kids they need our help. They need some direction.
Absolutely.
Get in on it. So again, this has been another great episode. We thank you so much.
We do. And if you'd like to support this show, you can go to dudesanddadspodcast.com/support. That'll take you to our Instagram page, our Patreon page, and all of our other show notes can be found at dudesanddadspodcast.com. Hey, thanks for listening, guys. Go out and get this book. Write your sons a letter and just show them the manhood. Like, explain this to them and just help them out.
Yeah. Guys, we love you. We're grateful for you. Keep the feedback coming. dudesanddadspodcast@gmail.com and all of our other social media feeds. Until next time, friends, grace and peace.